Hello, fellow nerds. When it comes to model railroading, my favorite dive bar is somewhere between scratch building and kit bashing, and I usually kind of prefer the latter. There are so many good kits out there, and I really love the ones from long ago. Therefore, a question I ask a lot is, what's that kit? Welcome to Rust and HO's Kit. My latest kit build is another antique. It was produced by AC Railway Models. I believe this brand became LW Models and was later then enveloped into the Ye Ol'd Huff and Puff line, now LaBelle Models, and soon to close. The car here is a maintenance of way supply car. This version, updated with plastic ladders, was probably made in the mid-50s. The main components are a good mix of wood and metal castings. The undercarriage and the doors are nice, but nothing too special. There are some details made of plastic which have not aged well. I'll likely use the ladders, but won't use the roof walks. Coupler boxes? No thanks. Windows? Sure, fine. I like all the handholds, and no mistake though, the best feature of this kit are those stamped metal roof ribs. I can't wait to try these. Most of the kit was in good shape. The wood certainly was. The parts that looked like white metal were fine. However, the kit included cast metal sprung trucks and cast couplers. I was trying to watch the springs in action, and the truck just shattered into 3 pieces. I'm guessing I was planning on not using those. As you can see, there's been some deterioration on the metal parts. Perhaps it's due to the anodizing or the coloring they use. I wasn't really planning on using them, but it's still sad to see that they didn't hold up. If you know what causes this, maybe you can tell us all, because I'm kind of curious. As designed, this model would be a typical 40-foot car. Unfortunately, my intended purpose is to add it to my backwoods work train. The other cars on this train are much smaller. Some are as little as 12 foot long. I have a 24-foot boxcar that I did previous video on this channel, and I've also modified an Ambroid reefer into a 30-foot car. I'm thinking I'll shorten this car to about 28 scale feet, so just under 4 inches. The first thing I need to do though is to see if I can even manage to chop out 30% of this car without making a huge mess of it. I think the roof, sides, and floor will be easy enough. This beautifully cast center beam though, it will be a problem. As noted, the modified center beam needs to be 2 3/8 inches. I would be removing 7/8 of an inch from each end of this beam and would completely remove the tapered sections. This wouldn't look logical and likely would interfere with the wheel sets. I started considering alternative understructures. I could do a truss rod style, stealing parts from another kit, or just do beams and disregard the demonstration of real-world physics. Then I remembered that I had received a kit with an underframe that wasn't part of the kit. I had no use for it, and I thought it would look reasonable. To make the piece 2 3/8, I needed to cut 1 3/16 from the center. Now I have a plan. I just need the courage to commit to it. I've recently learned the phrase, eat the frog first. And I've always tried to do this with any project, but especially furniture or art projects, which have a particular part which might cause the project to fail due to my inability to solve a challenge. In practice, I start with the riskiest or hardest part first, and if it doesn't work, then I don't have to waste time on the rest of the project. Or, in this case, I won't have ruined the roof and the floor as I find out that I don't have a center beam solution. So I jumped into the modification of the center beam. The cuts were surprisingly easy with the soft white metal. I used my favorite file to clean the burrs, and an old rat tail file helped me create the perfect fit for the bolsters. With my confidence peaking and the challenging part resolved, I was ready to start the cuts on my floorboard and roof board, cutting them to the new length and erasing 1 3/4 of an inch from their existence. The new length was calculated by taking the final length of the car and subtracting the thickness of the end sills, which were only a 1/16 of an inch. Therefore, my floor and roof length was 3 3/4. Cutting was straightforward other than the need to get them perfectly square, and I just used my miter box and made quick work of it. The basic construction of this car is to build a box with the roof, floor, and 2 blocks to support the ends. It's pretty simple, and the only real concern is to get them aligned and then glued square. Since the cuts were square, it didn't take much coercing. I started with one end block and the floor, then I did the other end block after the first had set in the clamps overnight. I should have added about a half a pound of weight at this point, but I forgot, and now I'll live with the fact that it's just a bit lighter than it should be. The next step was to attach the roof and complete the box, but I wanted to modify the roof first. The modification I imagined was to the end trim. I assumed the fascia boards on the end would follow the taper of the roof line. There's no way that they would cut a long board, square at the bottom with 2 angles at the top. Then I did some research and realized that I'm probably most definitely wrong about that. I hacked off the roof overhang to be flush on the other end. The first end was cut in the miter box. I prepared 4 pieces of 1/16 by 1/16 strip wood to represent the end roof trim boards and glued them in place. I left them long and then cut them to length using the roof edge as a guide. This is exactly the look I was going for, but like you guessed, I probably could have done this differently, but ultimately I'm happy with how it turned out, and after reviewing many photos, I did find one spectacular example to support my idea. Mythbusters would call this plausible, if not typical, but I think it looks great. I'm the only earthling who will notice or care anyway. Now that I had modified the roof ends to be quite unique, I was ready to attach the roof and get this kit moving from the chopping stages to the building stages. A simple bit of wood glue and a bunch of clamps, and I was very pleased with the alignment of all the pieces. This is a sign of a good kit to start with, and then perhaps even competently executed modifications. I reworked the end pieces. They needed only a minor tweak, so I just used my trusty file to remove material until they matched the roof profile. Then I cut the ends square at the bottom, finding the appropriate height to accommodate the end sills at the frame. I glued the end pieces and end sills in place, and then I used my big file, guided by the end block, to sand away a few microns and bring the ends perfectly flush with the sides. These are the moments where my big file performs like a rock star. On the unmodified version of this kit, there is the expectation that the doors will slide open. Therefore, we would need to make a door opening behind it. At first I began preparing this and realized how unlikely that would be. It looks nice though, but I already had a car with the open doors, and therefore I decided to make these permanently closed. Hence, no need for a door opening. I cut the sides to 2 inches, which left a deliberate overhang at the end. Gluing wasn't a challenge, but I used a lot of clamps. Afterwards, I was able to trim with my miter box and saw using the end of the car as a guide. Then I was able to file it flush as the rockstar file with the raspy voice sings his encore. Another perfectly flush fit at the corner. The car looks really good at this point. Obviously, building from wood, you want some of the wood to show through, and that means we need staining. And staining usually means warping, and warping means bracing or stabilizing. One benefit to staining after assembling is that there will likely be no warping. If I had stained it first, I would have needed to flatten the sides and the ends and hold them stable, or stabilize later. The drawback of gluing first is that anywhere glue touches, it will not stain. Glue joints squeeze out any places that were accidentally touched with glue would not take stain. I decided this was an acceptable risk due to the fact that most of the car would be painted and that staining might even be unnecessary. I used a rattle can primer in 2 colors to give the metal pieces a base coat, rust for the metal and khaki for the wooden doors. I was able to test fit the underframe, bolsters, and the couplers. It was perfect, almost like I planned the whole thing. The only real critical part of the undercar install is that everything needs to be perfectly centered. The bolsters had about a 32nd of an inch gap, just enough to cause problems if I didn't pay attention. I also managed to review the instructions here, and there was directions to cut out a notch in the end sill to accommodate the coupler. I was able to do that. 5-minute epoxy. It's ironic that this stuff sets up too quickly for me to do all these parts at once, but then it's too slow for me to get any of them in the right place. The only solution is to mix up a small batch for each one and hold it until it sets. I'm looking for new glue options and open to suggestions. Dry brushing. I've featured this technique in every one of my videos and probably will in every one in the future. It's just the cornerstone of miniature painting in my opinion. This car is no different. The basic concept of miniature painting is that you start with a dark, wet paint and then add more and more layers, getting lighter and lighter and drier as you go. I love this method and therefore rarely use an airbrush. We've already added the dark stain, which soaked into all the cracks pretty heavily, and it's funny to call this adding color. Light gray. I'm using a mix of MOW Sky Grey and flat white. It's meant to look like MOW gray or battleship gray, which is faded and deteriorated. I think I nailed it. I tried to apply the color a little heavier at the top of the car and let the wood at the bottom of the car show through more. I gave the doors a wash with the wood stain. They looked too dark at first, but I dabbed them with a paper towel. It worked really well with the khaki to achieve the weathered wood base coat, and after they were painted, they matched the car body nicely. The best part of this kit, the roof ribs. I learned a bit about boxcar roofs. Until the turn of the century, boxcar roofs were typically board-on-board construction, sometimes with tar paper or other materials like canvas between the two layers of boards. In the early 1900s, many companies started offering all-steel roofs. One such company was the Standard Railway Equipment Company. They advertised the Murphy solid steel roof. This panel design allowed the car to torsion, i.e. twist and flex, without putting stress on the roof panels. The flat panels were joined by a flanged U-shaped metal piece called a car line. These strengthened and protected the joints from damage and improved the seal to make the car watertight. The Murphy roof became one of the most widely used roof types in North America. Early adopters were the Southern Pacific in the 1920s and the DNRGW in the 1930s. The original Murphy roof was a flat panel. In 1937, the design was changed to have a raised section in the center of the panel and was rebranded as the improved Murphy solid steel roof. We see this design on many HO kits such as most of the 1937 Athearn boxcars and this roundhouse piece. In the post-war era, the design was improved again to the Murphy diagonal solid steel roof, popular in the 1950s, and then Standard Railway became Stanray, and they introduced the X-panel roof design in the 70s. I'll put some links in the description if you're interested. Geez, that was boring. Get back to my model. These pieces of stamped metal are representing the car lines of an early flat panel Murphy roof. Really cool for such an old kit. First, I had to bend them to match the profile of the roof. I used an old roof walk to get the bends right. While you watch me glue them into place, take a moment to notice how dramatic the wood grain is in this roof piece. It will come back to haunt me. I glued all the car lines in place with epoxy and then got ready to spray it with primer. After spraying the first coat, you can very clearly see that the roof is made from a piece of wood. So I had peeled off the roof ribs with my X-Acto blade and sanded the roof and sprayed it again. Then I did that 2 more times, finally obscuring the wood grain. I was so angry that I didn't even film that part. Recommendation is to do this part before assembly. After the numerous coats of primer, I'm giving the piece a good wash with dark rust. I'd like this roof to look as if it is completely rusted. I'm using a brush stroke running from the center ridge to the car edge following the path of rain runoff. I'm reattaching the car lines and just decided to use super glue. This worked fine. I also just eyeballed the spacing. I could have taken more time to mark the roof with a pencil. I think my spacing is darn good though, and this gave me some unwarranted confidence in winging it. But if you do something smart, always follow it up with something dumb. Since I was back on track, I immediately made another regrettable choice. I snipped the car lines flush at the roof edge, but then after reviewing many photos, I realized that the car lines wrap around the roof eave and fasten on the sides. That's when I said, "Oh, I see." Oh well, done now. I've made a nice recovery on the roof, and the clipping of the car lines won't be noticed by anyone really. The roof is beginning to look convincing as a rusted flat panel roof, but let's add some more paint. I'm using the light rust at full strength to try to cover up some of my sloppy glue, and I'm painting all the metal details with light rust. These will get multiple coats with similar colors, but only the first base needs to be accurate so that it can identify the shape of the detail. This is a hybrid brushing technique where I first start with areas that I want full coverage, and then as the brush dries out, I wrangle it like Eddie Van Halen's guitar. I'm purposely creating brush strokes of light rust to create some streaking on the roof. Finally, we're touching the high points with Vallejo Model Air Orange Rust, a lighter color. Plus, the airbrush consistency means that it's a little thinner, and as I apply it with a brush, it'll be more transparent, like a filter. During my roof rabbit hole, I noticed a statement in the Model Railroader's Guide that these are called running boards, not roof walks. Tell me what you think if you're passionate about the term or any others. This piece was broken, plus I also wanted it to look like individual boards on the roof. Fortunately, since I've shortened the car, I have extra material. I separated the 3 boards and stained them. I decided that I would even use the split piece to represent exactly that, a split board on the roof walk. I just can't say running boards. I dove into my bits box and found a piece that I could chop up into saddles and fix them to the car with the super glue. At this point, I'm feeling pretty good. The color is right, and if I'm being honest, that goes a long way. With no logic for it, I abandoned my recent practice of eyeballing everything and decided to put a center line on the saddles so that I could center the running boards. It almost worked. I was off to a good start. I created a small overhang at the end, staggered my mountings, sometimes joining the 2 boards at a saddle like they would be on a real car, and then I forgot that I had center marks and drifted off center anyway. Almost feels like a life lesson. I pulled them off and redid them, and so at some point I also drifted off camera, so here's the final result. The cast metal windows were in good shape and usable. I started by cleaning them, which didn't require much. I started with Vallejo white primer, which didn't actually work very well. I'm wondering if I need to start giving things an alcohol bath before priming. But I pushed on. I did do one rather brilliant thing. When I mixed my flat white and sky gray earlier in the video, I used this syringe to measure 1 mil of each. Then I sucked up the extra paint into the syringe and put a piece of tape on it. I'd forgotten about it until I saw it, and I was quite pleased with my foresight. Now I'm diving into my plastics bit box. I used to have a car like this. So sad. I'm looking for acetate since the included piece was yellowed, and I didn't really need much, about a half a square inch. I found a piece and justified having saved it. I then carefully measured and carefully cut 4 perfectly sized pieces and then had to shape them extensively with the file to get them to fit. Such is the method of modeling. Since this boxcar had so many ladders, I decided that it would probably be sensible that it would have lateral running boards. I think these are called laterals. I started in the bits box again and found what I needed, a single wide piece for the support, and then I diced up the remaining running board offcuts into 12 little pieces. I did not attempt to get them to the same size or even place them perfectly straight. A rough cut look is the goal. Adding gripe irons was once a daunting task, but I've come to love it. Just drill 2 holes 7/64 of an inch apart, perfectly square to one another, and push the bent rod in. Simple. Since there's also 4 ladders on the car, I decided to put 2 grab irons on the opposite end of the car. There are 4 stirrups as well. The holes look too big in this shot, but they're fine at a distance. Trust me that holes that are perfectly sized, the super glue dries before you get them in. I made quick work of the ladders. I painted them with primer and then super glued them on. I really didn't measure again, making use of the eyeballing technique. It's a real time saver. I'm getting real close to being finished now. The decals I have for the rest of this train are white. Too white, in fact. But this car is nearly white to begin with, so I needed something contrasting, and I decided to print my own decals. I wanted this one to look like someone did it with the only paint they had available, and possibly even to look like they did it with a rag instead of a brush. Probably wasn't typical, but it was fun. I'm numbering this car as number 4 for Miro Heiskanen, a superstar defenseman for the Dallas Stars. And the word work. I love it, but maybe I should have gone with a faded black instead of a faded boxcar red. Trucks and couplers are straightforward on this car, especially since half the coupler box is already mounted. Centering the pilot holes for the trucks could have been better since there's some slack in the hole through the bolster, but it worked out fine. Trucks are already primed, so I'm just adding a pop of light rust. Coupler height adjustment required was 1 washer as usual. Is that typical? It's pretty consistent for me. Yeah, I thought we were finished with the ladders, but then I remembered the brake wheel. Maybe I don't appreciate the brakes on a rail car in the same way that I don't appreciate them in video games. I don't ever remember they're there. There was a small brake wheel platform included, so I drilled a hole in it and primed it and painted it the body color. I still had the saved paint. I added a block of wood to the car frame and drilled a hole through that as well. I threaded the piano wire, which was included in the kit, and then added a bunch of glue. The little brass wheel from the kit was then adorned on top, and I believe it's accurate that some of the turn-of-the-century cars had their brake wheel mounted pretty high. Then I painted all the metal parts my favorite color. Couple of final touches. I added a little bit more India ink over the entire running board structure, especially on the cut ends which hadn't been touched up yet. Then I used flat white to add a little bit more highlighting on the roof eaves, the top of the panels, as well as the edges of the windows and doors. This just makes things pop a little more. The car was looking a bit muted, and now it speaks to me. So there we have it. Santa Clara River Valley Work Train number 4 by AC Models. This was a great kit. You may also need to replace a few parts if you try one yourself, but the important parts of the kit held up to the test of time well. And then I went and put a lot of effort into making it look old. But if you enjoyed this video, then support my channel, hit the like button or the subscribe or the bell, whatever works for you, and we'll see you soon.